Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us John Morehouse with the Georgia Centers of Innovation. Welcome, John.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Well, the Georgia Centers of Innovation, that's part of Georgia Department of Economic Development, right?
That's correct.
And then I guess there's several different centers of innovation, and your specialty is manufacturing?
That's correct. Yes. So we have a center of innovation for aerospace, one for energy, one for information technologies, one for logistics, and then my center, the manufacturing center.
So now, how did you get involved with the center?
So I joined the centers approximately, I guess I'm coming up on 5 years in 2021. And essentially, my background is in manufacturing. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training and spent several years in the electronics manufacturing industry as a manufacturing engineer. And then made my way to Georgia Tech and then into this position.
Now, how does the kind of the Georgia Center of Innovation regarding manufacturing, how does that help are you geared towards helping an up and coming manufacturer scale? Are you helping somebody get into manufacturing for the first time? Like, what's your role in this space?
So we actually work with any Georgia manufacturer, from an entrepreneur with an idea all the way up to a large Fortune 500 company. And essentially, there's two primary ways that we interact with companies. With our industries. There's direct interactions that we have with Georgia businesses, and then there are strategic partnerships, or what I like to call process-based economic development. So as an example of a direct interaction, we'll meet with a Georgia business, and again, anyone from an entrepreneur to a large company, and simply ask them, hey, what challenges are you facing that are, really hampering your growth? Or a lot of times we'll just say, hey, what's keeping you up at night? And we try to use our background and our expertise to connect them, not just to some resources in the state that might be able to help, but we really try to dig in and try to identify what are the right resources to help this company in the situation it's in, and which resources in academia and government or even industry could help them overcome this challenge and help them to grow. So that's a direct interaction example. And then we also work in strategic partnerships where in our industries, we see opportunities for, growth of the industry as a whole. And for example, if you look at electric vehicles, we all know that electric vehicle sales are growing, and Deloitte says that we're expected to go from about 2.5 million electric vehicle sales today to about 31 million in 2030. And importantly, that electric vehicles will be about 30% of the total market share for new car sales. So we're looking at, not only has Georgia been a leader in adopting the use of electric vehicles, we have about 30,000 on the road, but we're also working on in our department, how do we prepare for, manufacturing of both the vehicles and the components and the parts that will go into these vehicles. So right now, there's been several investments in Georgia in this space. You've heard probably one very popular one is SK Innovation in Commerce, Georgia. They're actually constructing a large manufacturing plant for lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. And then there's been several other announcements over the last couple of years of electric vehicle components manufacturers. And so what we're doing in my center, we've actually partnered with our Center of Innovation for Energy to look at, well, what does this mean for the manufacturers in the state, who would be well positioned to supply some of these components today. And then on the flip side, which manufacturers would be most affected as the market share of internal combustion engine cars and trucks declines, and what resources can we connect each of these groups to make sure that they're ready, for the future of manufacturing, in this case related to electric vehicles, but it really could be, any strategic change in the industry that we see coming, and how do we help our Georgia manufacturers adapt to this?
It sounds like the centers of innovation are extremely useful resource for anybody that's in that niche that you serve. And it sounds like you want to know all the players, right? This isn't something just for a handful of well-connected folks that get the benefit from this. You're here to serve anybody in manufacturing in the state, right?
That's correct. And in fact, we're really here to serve anyone in the state. Coming back to the entrepreneur, anyone with an idea can come to us, and we'll give them advice, meet them kind of wherever they are. Maybe they need to do some customer discovery to find out if their product would sell, or maybe they're at that point where they say, hey, I developed this product. Now I want to make 500 of them to get it out there in the marketplace. What Georgia contract manufacturers could help me do this? And we'll make that connection. All the way up, to a small manufacturer, medium manufacturer, large manufacturer. We're a state government agency, and we're open to helping anyone in the state. And our goal is really, we want to grow the manufacturing industry. So our goal is to help anyone we can whose companies are going to grow and help to achieve that goal.
Now, I recently interviewed a company that I think went through your innovation center, Carbice. Can you talk about how that relationship came about and why that was important? Like, how'd you learn about Carbice, and how did you guys connect and figure out ways to work together?
Sure. Yeah. And the Carbice project is particularly interesting to us. I just discussed kind of the two modes of operation we have, directly working with companies and then looking at how we can affect the manufacturing industry from a strategic standpoint. And this Carbice project really fits the bill for both of those. And I'll get into that as I move through the story. But so our center is located within the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute. And the reason for this is so that, we're regularly rubbing elbows with some of the leading researchers in the world, really, in the manufacturing space. And so that's really how this project got started. Dr. Billy D. Brown is a faculty member at the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute. And, through having conversations with him over the years, he's very well aware of what we do and how we can help companies. And so he came to our senior project manager, Alyssa Rumsey, and said, hey, I really think that Carbice could benefit from learning about your center and the other centers, and how you might be able to connect them to the right resources in the state. And so we had, kind of several follow-up questions, or conversations, I should say, and answered a lot of questions for them, and really tried to understand what their goals were. And, we realized through these conversations that due to the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute's unique set of expertise and access to facilities, they were really in a great place to help Carbice kind of meet their pressing needs and overcome some current challenges, which were, at the time, they were producing at the lab scale. So they were producing their thermal tape and producing in small quantities in the lab at Georgia Tech. And so what they wanted to do was essentially scale up. And in order to do that, they really had two challenges that they needed to come. One was kind of developing their standing operating procedures for their manufacturing process, including, very importantly, what is our quality assurance program? And if we're going to scale production, how do we know that we can do that and meet our quality requirements? So that was kind of number one. But number two, key component relating to that was they had to ensure that throughout the product's life cycle, from when it's manufactured to, the end of its life, that it would be safe for those working with it and around it in terms of nanomaterial particle release. So a second key related goal that they were trying to achieve at the time was they wanted to conduct some experiments to acquire data so that they could file a pre-manufacture notice with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and basically quantify the levels of the nanomaterial release throughout the product life cycle, and also characterize those particles in terms of their degree of toxicity. So in summary, the overarching goal for them was, hey, we want to develop standard operating procedures for our manufacturing process, and we want to develop quality systems, and we want to show that to the EPA that our products are going to be safe. And if we do this, we think we can increase our manufacturing capacity by up to 40 times, while still achieving compliance with the necessary safety regulations. So that was kind of where they were at the time when we met with them.
And but that specific challenge is pretty complex and requires a lot of knowledge, connections, and moving parts involved in kind of helping out there. How did you for them to trust you with something of that size, you had to have a pretty good relationship, and you have to understand their business pretty well in order to even find the appropriate resources to help them.
That's exactly right. And that's really where our connection, coming back to the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute, that's really where our connection to Billy D. Brown and bringing him to the table was critical. Billy D. Brown has been working in the nano manufacturing space for many years. And what he knew was, what are the key facilities that we need? Where are they on campus? How do we get access to them? And he also knew kind of the basic steps in the manufacturing process so that, he could envision what it was that they would need to do. And the other key part of this was that he had some experience with monitoring particle release and setting up, experiments to do this. And that was a key component of the data that needed to be collected to be submitted to the EPA. So Billy D. Brown actually put together this project proposal that would be, the project to be performed at Georgia Tech using some of its key resources like the Institute of Electronics and Nanotechnology, and really leveraging those facilities to meet the goals that we talked about in this project. And like you said, this is not your everyday set of equipment or machines that you could just walk into a makerspace, for example, or even a machine shop to find. These are highly specialized equipment and, available within these facilities at Georgia Tech. So knowing this, Billy D put together this commercialization grant application on behalf of Georgia Tech and received matching funds from our center to partner with Carbice to complete the project.
Now, this to me shows the importance of the center as a whole, because to have somebody in the state that is kind of this mega connector that can connect dots in a lot of ways, because you're so deep in your knowledge and the available resources in the state, to me, this is invaluable, because you're the ones who can really jumpstart a project or take it to the next level, because you know all the players. And that's why it's so important for anybody that's in manufacturing to get on your radar, because they don't know who you know, and you don't know what they can do. So the more we know of each other, the more dots everybody can connect for each other.
That's exactly right. We talk about this often, to where, if you think about a manufacturing company, even in the metro Atlanta area, where they're surrounded by a lot of the different resources that are available nearby, Georgia Tech, the Advanced Technology Development Center, all of these different resources, in the Midtown area and the metro area. When you talk to them, it's not really their job to know about these resources. And so oftentimes they just don't know for a specific problem who they should call. And Georgia Tech, especially as an example, it's, where's the front door to Georgia Tech? And so our goal or our job is to have knowledge of these resources, like you mentioned, know who's out there, what resources could potentially help. That's number one. And then number two is really that experience that we have in the industry ourselves, so that number one, we can go in and kind of talk the talk when we talk to these manufacturers. And then number two, we're able to kind of help them think through their problems. And really, a lot of times what we end up doing is having conversations where a client, as we would call them, would think that they needed one thing at the beginning of our discussion. And then by the end of our discussion, with us knowing about some of these resources available at Georgia Tech or Georgia Southern, wherever it may be, that they didn't know of, they realize, oh, okay, great. Let's take this in a different direction and take a much shorter path to the solution. And just to kind of put the icing on the cake with that statement, I mean, I think the other thing is that, we're not working with companies to make money. We're there to simply help them grow. We have the same, our missions are very much aligned. We want them to grow in Georgia. And so we tend to be an objective consultant is kind of a term that I use sometimes, that they can come to without having to pay us anything, without, thinking about, well, maybe they're trying to get a project. And we're there to help them think through things objectively, and then really try to hone in on the right resources that will, help them overcome their challenge.
And then just like you did with Carbice, in their case, there was it's a pretty happy ending. They've gotten additional funding. They're really kind of ramping up production. Things are going pretty well over there at Carbice with your help.
That's right. Yeah, they just they just received a Series A funding, a large, influx of capital that will help them grow. Absolutely. And then the other piece of this project that I kind of mentioned at the beginning of telling the story, that's exciting to me, is that we can, now that Carbice has kind of gone through this process of working with Georgia Tech to scale from the lab scale environment, small quantity production, to full production with a nanotechnology based product, we kind of have the the steps that they took to do that at Georgia Tech. And so we have sort of a set of best practices, and we want to take that set of best practices and kind of turn that into what we're calling a nano technology manufacturing center at Georgia Tech, where essentially it utilizes the knowledge that Carbice gained and can help others navigate through the system at Georgia Tech and help others develop their nanotechnology based products. And so when we think about that in terms of economic development, not only will that help other startups like Carbice in the nanotechnology area, but it could help large companies, and it could also encourage companies from other states to want to relocate to Georgia with this great resource available. So that was kind of the second piece of the project that Billy D. Brown from the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute began to work on, and they've submitted some proposals to the federal government to try to get this idea started, and we'll continue to do that. But that's kind of a strategic growth initiative that could really help to grow our manufacturing industry here in Georgia in this new and exciting field.
So if there's a business out there that wants to learn more about the center and the services, how can they get a hold of you or somebody on your team?
Yeah, so that's the best way is to go to georgia.org /Centers of Innovation, or you can just simply go to georgia.org and there'll be a button there that you can click for Centers of Innovation. It will describe what we do in all 5 centers and list our contact information. And if I would just say to companies, if they're not sure who to call, pick any of the contacts there and reach out to us. And we all work in concert on a regular basis to, if it's not our area, we'll connect them to another area. Or if it is, and then there's 2 centers that should be working on the project, we'll do that too. So that would be the way to get in touch with us. And we're always happy to try to connect them to the right resource.
Well, John, you're doing important work and we appreciate you. And the website, one more time, is just georgia.org. We'll get them to the neighborhood and they can kind of drill down to whatever specialty they're interested in.
That's correct. Georgia.org.
All right. Well, thank you for doing the work that you do.
Well, thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me on and sharing the good stories that we have, and we hope to continue to grow Georgia's economy.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see y'all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.